Most people associate manipulation with raised voices, pressure, or overt control. But the most effective forms of manipulation rarely look aggressive. They look calm. They look reasonable. And in many cases, they look like silence. Silence removes feedback. It creates uncertainty. And uncertainty quietly shifts power. When emotional response, explanation, or closure is withheld, the brain doesn't settle. It compensates. It fills in gaps, seeks clarity, tries to restore balance. This is the psychology of silent manipulation, how it works, why it's effective, and why it often goes unnoticed. Silence appears in places where connection matters. Relationships, families, work environments, social hierarchies. It's rarely announced. There's no clear confrontation, no obvious incident. Instead, something subtle changes. Responses become shorter. Explanations disappear. Emotional presence fades. And because nothing overt has happened, the discomfort feels difficult to justify. Silence doesn't demand attention. It quietly creates an imbalance. At its core, silent manipulation relies on one principle: uncertainty. The human brain is wired to seek stability in social bonds. When feedback disappears, the nervous system registers ambiguity as a potential threat, not danger, but unease. And unease motivates action. Silence shifts emotional labor. The quiet individual no longer works to maintain clarity. The other person does. From a behavioral standpoint, this is efficient. The less someone reacts, explains, or reassures, the more psychological weight transfers to the other side. Silence also creates asymmetry. The person who speaks less appears more composed, more controlled, more powerful. Not because they are, but because emotional restraint is often mistaken for authority. The first pattern is strategic withdrawal. It usually follows a moment of closeness, alignment, or emotional exposure. Not conflict, not disagreement. Connection is established, and then subtly reduced. Responses slow. Availability narrows. Engagement becomes inconsistent. What makes this effective is timing. Withdrawal occurs after emotional investment, not before it. The contrast creates psychological tension. The mind begins to search for a cause, not because something was said, but because something disappeared. This absence shifts attention inward. People begin monitoring their own behavior, replaying interactions, and attempting to restore what felt stable only days earlier. The silence isn't explained because an explanation would restore emotional balance, and balance would neutralize the effect. The second pattern is selective engagement. Communication does not stop completely. That would be too obvious. Instead, it becomes conditional. Neutral or pleasant topics receive a response. Difficult or clarifying questions are ignored. Emotional accountability is postponed indefinitely. This creates a false sense of normalcy. Interaction continues, but only on controlled terms. The inconsistency keeps the other person attentive, cautious, and invested. They learn, often unconsciously, which topics maintain access and which threaten it. Over time, this shapes behavior, not through force, but through omission. The pattern continues because it produces results. Continued engagement without the cost of emotional reciprocity. The third pattern. Here, silence appears alongside composure. Concerns are met with neutrality rather than confrontation. Language remains calm. Tone remains controlled. Phrases like, "You're reading too much into it," "There's nothing wrong," "You're being sensitive." Because the delivery is measured, the dismissal feels reasonable. And because it feels reasonable, it's rarely challenged. This form of invalidation doesn't deny facts. It reframes perception. The emotional experience is minimized without appearing dismissive. Over time, confidence erodes. Not dramatically, but gradually. The individual begins questioning their interpretations instead of the pattern itself. This is not aggression. It's psychological erosion. Silent manipulation avoids visibility. There is no defining moment, no argument to reference, no clear violation of boundaries, only a consistent emotional outcome. Discomfort accumulates slowly without a clear source, and without a source, the discomfort feels internal. This is why the behavior often goes unchallenged. People assume responsibility for feelings they cannot externally justify. They search for clarity within themselves instead of examining the pattern. Intelligence and emotional awareness do not protect against this. In many cases, they make people more vulnerable because the behavior leaves no evidence, only effect. From a psychological standpoint, the payoff is structural. Silence reduces emotional effort. It limits accountability. It preserves distance while maintaining influence. The person using silence does not need to explain, reassure, or engage fully. They retain flexibility while the other side seeks stability. This creates perceived control, not through dominance, but through restraint. Emotional detachment is often interpreted as strength, and strength is rarely questioned. From a behavioral perspective, this method is efficient. Low exposure, low risk, high leverage, which is precisely why it persists. Not all silence is manipulation. Some people withdraw due to emotional overload. Others due to avoidance, insecurity, or limited capacity. Intent cannot always be inferred from a single instance. What matters is consistency. Patterns reveal more than explanations. Repetition matters more than reassurance. When silence reliably produces confusion, imbalance, or anxiety, it stops being neutral. Behavior should always be evaluated over time, not in isolation. The most influential behaviors rarely announce themselves. They don't demand attention. They quietly redirect it. Silence is not powerful because it communicates meaning, but because it creates space, and the human mind instinctively fills it. Once a pattern becomes visible, its influence changes. What remains is awareness, and awareness alters the balance.